boy drew a motorcycle on his hospital wall. Hours later they arrived. A 10-year-old boy lifted a blue marker and drew a motorcycle on his hospital wall. Not a toy, not a cartoon, a real one. Chrome pipes, heavy wheels, a rider with no face. When his mother asked who it was for, he whispered, "They're coming." No one believed him. The room smelled like antiseptic and lemon wipes. The kind of clean that never quite feels clean. Machines blinked. The monitor kept a steady rhythm beside the bed, like a quiet metronome counting down something no one wanted to name. Ethan Cole had been in room 212 for 13 days. He was 10 years old, tall for his age, thin now in a way that didn't belong to children. His dark hair had started falling out in soft patches, leaving behind pale spaces his mother pretended not to notice. His eyes were still bright, though. Green, sharp, always watching. The diagnosis had come fast, a rare infection that attacked his heart muscle. Sudden, violent, unfair. One minute he had been riding his bicycle down Maple Street in Cedar Ridge, Ohio. The next he couldn't breathe. His mother, Rachel, still heard the sound of the ambulance siren in her sleep. It blended with the beeping of the monitor. It followed her into the hospital cafeteria. It sat with her in the plastic chair beside his bed. On the fourth day, Ethan asked for something to draw with. Rachel found a blue marker in the bottom of her purse. It had been there since back-to-school season. She hesitated when he leaned toward the wall. "Not on the paint," she said softly. He looked at her the way only children can look at adults, not defiant, not begging, just certain. "I need it somewhere big," he whispered. She let him. He started with the wheels, 2 perfect circles, careful, steady, even with the IV taped to his wrist. Then the frame. Long, low, detailed in ways a 10-year-old shouldn't understand unless he loved something deeply. When he finished the outline, he added a rider. Helmet, jacket, a patch on the back. Rachel swallowed. "Who's that?" Ethan didn't look at her. He shaded the engine darker. "They're coming," he said. "Who is?" He pressed harder with the marker. "You'll see." Outside the window, the parking lot sat quiet under a gray October sky. 40 miles away, a group of riders refueled at a gas station off Route 16. They had no idea a boy in room 212 had just drawn them into his story. Rachel Cole had always been practical. She worked 2 jobs before Ethan got sick, mornings at a bakery, evenings bookkeeping for a local hardware store. She paid bills on time, packed lunches with handwritten notes, fixed squeaky doors herself because hiring someone felt like admitting defeat. She did not believe in miracles. She believed in effort. She believed in showing up. She believed in doctors who used charts and clear words. Dr. Aaron Whitaker was one of those doctors, mid-40s, calm voice, tired eyes that carried the weight of too many conversations in quiet rooms. He explained Ethan's condition with gentle precision. The infection had damaged part of his heart. The treatment was aggressive. Risky, necessary. "We're seeing small improvements," he said on day 10. Small. Rachel clung to that word like it was solid ground. Ethan, meanwhile, kept drawing. By the end of the second week, the hospital wall had transformed. There was a road stretching across the white paint, mountains in the distance. A house that looked like theirs, crooked mailbox included. A dog with floppy ears that resembled the golden retriever they'd lost 2 years ago. And at the center, larger than everything else, were motorcycles. Not 1, 6, each different, each detailed. Chrome pipes, saddlebags, windshield, one with flames on the side. The riders had no faces, just helmets, jackets, patches. Nurse Maria stopped in her tracks the first time she saw it. "Those are good," she said, surprised. Ethan shrugged. "They're real." Rachel forced a smile. "Sweetheart, you've never even been on a motorcycle." He finally looked at her. Dad had one. The air in the room shifted. Rachel hadn't spoken Ethan's father's name in years. Daniel Cole had left when Ethan was 5, not with shouting, not with drama, just a slow drift into silence. A phone call that became shorter, visits that became rare, then nothing. But before he left, Daniel rode a black Harley-Davidson. Ethan used to sit on it in the driveway, small hands gripping the handles, helmet too big for his head. Rachel felt something tight rise in her chest. "Your dad's not coming," she said gently. Ethan turned back to the wall. "I know." He added another rider. "They are." Outside, clouds gathered low over Cedar Ridge, and somewhere on the highway, engines rumbled like distant thunder. Cedar Ridge was the kind of town where people locked their doors but still waved at strangers. Population 8,400, 2 traffic lights, 1 high school, a diner called Maggie's that had been serving pie since 1982. People here noticed things, new cars, new faces, loud noises, especially loud noises. The first time the motorcycles passed through town that month, it was a Saturday afternoon. 8 bikes, maybe 9, leather jackets, heavy boots, exhaust pipes that rattled windows. At Maggie's diner, Forks paused midair. "Don't like that," someone muttered. "They're from the Iron Saints," another whispered, as if the name itself carried weight. The Iron Saints Motorcycle Club had a reputation that traveled faster than they did. Stories of bar fights, long rides across state lines, brotherhood sealed in ink and gasoline. What people didn't talk about were the charity runs, the hospital visits, the quiet donations left in envelopes with no return address. Rumors are louder than truth. At Cedar Ridge Medical Center, the security guard had already heard about them. "They better not cause trouble," he said to a nurse one evening. No one connected them to Ethan. Not yet. Back in room 212, Ethan added shadows beneath the bikes. Depth. Motion. He drew the road curving toward the hospital window as if it led straight to him. Rachel watched him from her chair. "Why motorcycles?" she asked softly. Ethan took his time answering. "Because they don't stop." "What do you mean?" "They keep going even when it's hard. Dad said that. Wind hits you. Rain hits you, but you hold on." Rachel turned her face away so he wouldn't see her cry. That night, Ethan's fever spiked. Alarms sounded. Nurses moved fast, efficient, focused. Rachel stood against the wall with the motorcycles, and pressed her hands together so tightly her knuckles turned white. Dr. Whittaker spoke in low tones. Adjustments were made. Medications changed. "It's a setback," he said later, "but we're not giving up." "Not giving up?" Rachel nodded. Behind her, on the hospital wall, the writers faced forward, as if they were already on their way. The fever broke just before sunrise, not dramatically, not with applause or relief flooding the room. It simply loosened its grip degree by degree until Ethan's skin no longer burned under Rachel's trembling hand. She hadn't slept. She had stood by the window most of the night, watching the parking lot lights hum against the dark. Every time a car pulled in, her heart jumped. Every time it wasn't for them, it fell again, though she didn't know who them was. At 6:12 a.m., Ethan opened his eyes. They looked older than they should have. "You stayed," he said. "Always," Rachel whispered. He nodded, satisfied, as if that confirmed something he already knew. Later that morning, Nurse Maria brought in fresh sheets and paused at the wall. "You added more," she said softly. Ethan had drawn clouds above the road now. "Wind lines behind the bikes. Motion. They're closer," he replied. Rachel forced a small laugh. "Honey, you can't just will people here." Ethan looked at her, calm and steady. "I didn't will them." "Then what?" "I asked." The words hung in the air. Rachel didn't ask who he had asked. Instead, she stepped into the hallway when Dr. Whittaker arrived for rounds. "He keeps talking about someone coming," she said quietly. The doctor listened with careful stillness. "Children cope in symbols," he explained. "It gives them control." Control? Rachel nodded. She wanted that to be true. But something about the way Ethan said it, not hopeful, not desperate, just certain, unsettled her. That afternoon, a hospital administrator stopped by room 212. He frowned at the drawings. "This can't stay," he said firmly. "It's against policy." Rachel felt something sharp rise in her chest. "He's 10, she said. "He might not." She couldn't finish the sentence. The man hesitated. Nurse Maria stepped forward. "It's morale," she said evenly. "For him, for the staff." After a long pause, the administrator sighed. 3 more days, he said. "Then it gets painted." 3 days. Rachel didn't know why the number felt important, but Ethan did. He smiled faintly when she told him. 3's enough, he whispered. Outside, the sky darkened with gathering clouds, and somewhere beyond the edge of Cedar Ridge, engines started up again. The second setback came without warning. Ethan had been sitting up, eating applesauce, even joking weakly with Nurse Maria about hospital food. Then his monitor changed. The rhythm stuttered. Rachel saw it before anyone else did. She didn't understand the numbers. She didn't need to. A mother knows. Within seconds, the room filled with movement. Doctors, nurses, calm voices layered over urgency. Rachel was guided gently into the hallway. The door closed. The motorcycles stared back at her from the wall through the small window. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was speaking to anymore. Inside, Dr. Whittaker worked with focused intensity. Adjustments, injections, commands spoken clearly. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Rachel thought about Daniel. She hadn't called him, not once. He hadn't earned the right to be here. But Ethan still drew him in ink and blue marker, still believed in something arriving. The door finally opened. Dr. Whittaker removed his gloves slowly. "He's stable," he said, "but we're at a crossroads." Rachel's knees almost gave out. "What does that mean?" "It means," he answered carefully, "we need his heart to fight." That night, Ethan slept deeply. Too deeply. Rachel sat beside him and traced the outline of one of the drawn motorcycles with her eyes. Chrome pipes, thick tires, a rider leaning forward. She remembered Daniel revving his engine in their old driveway. The vibration under her feet. The thrill and the fear tangled together. She had hated that bike. It had taken him away on weekends, given him an identity bigger than fatherhood. Now it felt like the only bridge left between her son and hope. At 2:17 a.m., a sound rolled across the hospital parking lot. Low, distant, not thunder. Engines. Rachel froze. It faded just as quickly. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on her. But in his sleep, Ethan's fingers twitched, as if gripping handlebars. By morning, the town had heard them. "They're back," someone said at Maggie's diner. 8 motorcycles parked outside the gas station on Route 9. Leather jackets. Patches stitched across broad backs, boots heavy against concrete. The Iron Saints had returned. Inside the hospital, security tightened slightly. Nothing dramatic, just awareness. Rachel heard whispers in the hallway. "Those biker guys are in town." She didn't connect it. Not yet. In room 212, Ethan woke with more color in his cheeks than he'd had in days. "They're close," he said quietly. Rachel smoothed his blanket. "Sweetheart, no one's allowed up here without clearance." He smiled faintly. "They will be." Downstairs, in the lobby, a tall man with gray at his temples approached the front desk. His leather jacket bore a patch shaped like a shield with wings. His name was Marcus Hale, president of the Iron Saints. His voice was steady. "We heard there's a boy up here who likes motorcycles." The receptionist blinked. "Excuse me." Marcus removed his helmet. His eyes were kind, tired, familiar with grief. "We don't want trouble," he said. "Just 5 minutes." Security shifted uneasily. Hospital policy didn't have a clear section for this. Upstairs, Rachel stepped into the hallway again for coffee. She noticed the silence first. Then the vibration, not loud, not aggressive, just present. Through the front windows of the hospital, 8 motorcycles lined the curb. Sunlight caught chrome. People stared from across the street. Rachel's breath caught. For a split second, fear surfaced. The same fear the town carried. Then she saw something else. One of the riders held a small stuffed bear in gloved hands. Another carried a folded, child-sized leather vest. Not threatening, intentional. A nurse hurried toward the elevators. "They're asking about a boy who drew bikes," she whispered. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she thought she might collapse. Room 212. Ethan was sitting upright, waiting. Hospital rules are firm until something human presses against them. Dr. Whittaker met Marcus Hale in the hallway outside the pediatric wing. "This is highly unusual," the doctor said. Marcus nodded. "So is being 10 with a failing heart." The 2 men stood in silence for a moment. Behind Marcus, 7 other riders waited respectfully. Helmets tucked under arms, jackets zipped, eyes lowered. They did not look like the stories told about them at Maggie's diner. They looked like men who understood loss. "We ride for kids," Marcus said quietly. "It's what we do." Dr. Whittaker studied him. 5 minutes, he said finally. The hallway seemed to hold its breath as the riders approached room 212. Rachel stood frozen near the door. Ethan saw their shadows first, then the jackets, then the patches. His eyes filled. "You came," he whispered. Marcus stepped inside slowly, as if entering sacred ground. "We heard someone drew us," he said. Ethan's gaze flicked to the wall. Marcus turned. He saw the motorcycles, the road, the house, the riders with no faces. He removed his gloves carefully. "Those are saints," he said, voice thick. Ethan nodded. "I know." Rachel covered her mouth. "How did you?" she started, but the words dissolved. Marcus stepped closer to the bed. "Your dad ride?" he asked gently. Ethan nodded once. He was Iron Saints, the boy whispered. The room went still. Rachel's breath caught painfully in her chest. She had never known. Daniel had hidden that part of his life from her in the later years. Said he'd quit. Marcus swallowed. "Daniel Cole?" he asked softly. Rachel looked up sharply. "Yes." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "He was my brother." Silence, heavy, sacred. "He passed 2 years ago," Marcus continued gently. "Road accident in Nevada." Rachel's knees weakened. Daniel had disappeared. He hadn't abandoned. He had died, and no one had known how to reach her. Ethan's small hand lifted weakly. "I knew," he whispered. Marcus stepped forward and took it carefully. "We're here now," he said. Behind him, engines cooled outside, and in room 212 something long broken began to mend. Grief has a strange way of rearranging a room. Rachel sat down slowly in the chair beside Ethan's bed, her world tilting into a shape she didn't recognize. Daniel hadn't left. He hadn't chosen silence. He had been gone in a way no one could fix, and somehow her son had carried that truth quietly inside him. Marcus pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. "We tried to find you," he said. "Address changed, phone disconnected. By the time we tracked Cedar Ridge, we were too late." Rachel nodded slowly. "I thought he walked away," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "He talked about Ethan every ride." Ethan's breathing steadied, as if the words themselves were medicine. The other riders stepped closer to the wall. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with tear-filled eyes, traced the air near a drawn bike. "He got the pipes right," he murmured. They laughed softly through their emotion. Marcus unfolded the child-sized leather vest. On the back was a small patch, Iron Saints. "We don't patch kids," Marcus said gently, "but Daniel would have wanted this." He draped it carefully over Ethan's blanket. The room felt warmer, not louder, just fuller. Dr. Whittaker stood near the door watching monitors. Something subtle shifted. Ethan's heart rhythm steadied, not dramatically, just enough. Rachel leaned forward. "You see that?" she whispered. The doctor nodded slowly. Outside, townspeople gathered across the street, curious, cautious. They saw leather jackets. They saw motorcycles. They did not see tears on grown men's faces. Inside room 212, Ethan looked at Marcus. "Can we ride?" he asked. Marcus smiled through wet eyes. "When you're ready." Ethan nodded, satisfied. For the first time in days, he closed his eyes without strain, not slipping away, resting. And on the hospital wall, the road no longer looked unfinished. The riders stayed longer than 5 minutes. No one stopped them. Nurses rotated quietly. Machines continued their steady rhythm. Rachel sat between Marcus and Ethan's bed, listening to stories she had never heard. Daniel fixing a stranger's flat tire in the rain. Daniel organizing a toy drive every December. Daniel riding through the night just to sit beside a sick child for 10 minutes. "He believed showing up mattered," Marcus said. Rachel swallowed hard. "So did I," she whispered. Marcus looked at her gently. "He never stopped loving you." The words didn't erase the past, but they softened its edges. By late afternoon, the hospital allowed the riders to wheel Ethan's bed near the large window overlooking the parking lot. One by one, the Iron Saints started their engine. The sound rolled upward, deep and steady, not threatening, not wild, protective. Ethan's eyes opened wide. Marcus leaned close. "You feel that?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "It's like a heartbeat." Rachel gripped her son's hand. Tears slid freely down her face now. Outside, townspeople stood silent, watching something they didn't understand. Inside, Dr. Whittaker studied the monitor again. "His numbers are improving," he said quietly. No miracle announcement, no dramatic declaration, just quiet progress. Engine by engine, the riders revved once more. A salute, a promise. Ethan squeezed Rachel's fingers weakly. "They came," he whispered. "Yes," she said. The engines faded slowly, like thunder rolling away from a storm that decided not to break. Ethan slept through most of the afternoon. Not the heavy, frightening sleep from the night before. This was different. Peaceful, his breathing even, his fingers relaxed around the edge of the leather vest resting on his chest. Rachel stayed beside him, afraid to move too far in case the moment shifted again. Marcus and 2 of the Iron Saints remained in the hallway. They didn't crowd the room, they didn't demand attention, they simply waited, present. Dr. Whittaker returned just before sunset with fresh lab results in his hand. He didn't smile right away. Doctors learned to protect hope carefully. But this time, when he looked at the monitor, his shoulders lowered slightly. The inflammation markers are down, he said quietly. Rachel blinked. Down. Yes, it's subtle, but it's real. He pressed her hand to her mouth. How? Doctor! Whitaker hesitated, then gave the only honest answer he had. Sometimes the body responds when the heart finds something to hold on to. Rachel looked at her son, at the vest, at the motorcycle still painted in blue across the wall. Ethan stirred as the last light of day filtered through the window. Did they leave? He asked. They're still here, Rachel whispered. He nodded faintly. Good. In the hallway, Marcus leaned against the wall beneath the drawing of the largest motorcycle. He studied it carefully. Daniel used to draw like that when they were young, on napkins, on gas station receipts, always bikes, always roads. Marcus reached out and lightly touched the paint beside the sketch. We got you, brother, he murmured under his breath. Downstairs, hospital staff gathered near the entrance windows, watching the riders talk quietly among themselves. The town across the street still stared. The stories they had told about these men began to feel thinner now. Not gone, but cracking. Upstairs in room 212, Ethan's monitor continued its steady rhythm. For the first time in 2 weeks, Rachel allowed herself to lean back in her chair and close her eyes. Not in fear, in gratitude. Outside, the October sky turned gold, and the motorcycle's wake next morning came softer than the ones before it. No alarms, no rushed footsteps, just quiet. Ethan woke with a faint smile on his face. I dreamed we were riding, he said. Rachel brushed his hair back gently. Where did we go? Far, he answered, but we came back. That part mattered. Dr. Whitaker arrived early. He checked the monitors, reviewed the chart, listened to Ethan's heart with careful attention. Then he did something Rachel hadn't seen him do yet. He smiled without restraint. The heart function is improving, he said. Rachel felt the words move through her like light breaking through heavy clouds. Improving, she repeated, almost afraid to believe it. Yes, not perfect, not finished, but improving. Marcus stood near the door, silent, hands folded in front of him. Ethan looked at him. Told you, he whispered. Marcus let out a soft laugh that trembled at the edges. You sure did. Word spread quickly through the hospital. The boy in 212, the bikers, the improvement. Nurses who had been skeptical now peeked inside with warmer eyes. By noon, hospital administration made a decision. The drawings would not be painted over, not in 3 days, not at all. Instead, they would preserve that wall. Rachel stared at it, tears filling her eyes again. The road stretching across white paint no longer felt like a goodbye. It felt like a bridge. Outside, reporters began gathering across the street. Cameras pointed, microphones ready. Marcus stepped out to speak briefly. No statement, he said calmly. Just here for a kid. Simple, true. Back upstairs, Ethan asked for the blue marker again. Rachel hesitated, then handed it to him. He added something new beneath the largest motorcycle. A word, home, not in perfect letters, but clear enough. And for the first time since the ambulance ride, Rachel believed they might actually make it back there. Recovery is rarely dramatic. It is quiet work, breath by breath, step by step. Over the next few days, Ethan's strength returned slowly. Not like a miracle, more like sunrise creeping across the sky. Physical therapists visited his room. Nurses adjusted medications downward instead of upward. The word stable began to sound hopeful instead of cautious. The Iron Saints rotated visits so the hospital never felt overwhelmed. They brought small things, a miniature model motorcycle, a framed photo of Daniel smiling beneath a wide western sky. Rachel held that picture for a long time. I didn't know, she whispered again. Marcus nodded gently. He talked about Cedar Ridge like it was the center of the world. But Rachel laughed through tears. It felt small. Not to him, Marcus replied. One afternoon, Ethan sat up without help. Marcus pulled a chair close. You ready for a short ride? He asked with a grin. Ethan's eyes widened. They didn't leave the hospital. Instead, the riders lined the parking lot below his window again. One by one, they started their engines. The sound rose steady and strong. Ethan closed his eyes and held the leather vest against his chest. Rachel stood behind him, arms wrapped gently around his shoulders. Down on the street, something shifted in Cedar Ridge. People who once crossed the road to avoid leather jackets now watched with softened expression. At Maggie's diner, someone placed a small jar near the register labeled, for room 212. Coins dropped in quietly, not loudly, just steadily. Back upstairs, Dr. Whittaker reviewed new scans. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't coincidence. This was resilience, human connection, hope layered over medicine. When he stepped into room 212 that evening, Ethan was laughing. The sound filled the hallway. And for a moment, it felt like the hospital itself breathed easier. 2 weeks later, Ethan walked 3 steps on his own. They were small steps, shaky, but real. Rachel cried openly this time, no holding back. Marcus stood near the window, arms crossed, pretending to study the parking lot so no one would see his eyes. Dr. Whittaker cleared his throat gently. "We're talking discharge soon," he said. The word felt impossible. Discharge, home. Ethan turned toward the wall. The motorcycles still stretched across white paint. The road no longer looked distant. It looked traveled. "I don't want them to erase it," Ethan said suddenly. "They won't," Rachel promised. The hospital had already decided. The wall would stay, a reminder of a boy who drew hope into existence. On the morning of his release, the Iron Saints gathered outside once more. Not loud, not disruptive, just present. Hospital staff lined the windows. Rachel helped Ethan into a wheelchair, the leather vest folded carefully in his lap. As they rolled toward the elevator, Ethan looked up at Marcus. "You'll still ride?" he asked. "Every mile," Marcus said. "For Dad, too. Especially for him." Outside, sunlight hit chrome and glass. The engine started, not roaring, humming steady like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Townspeople stood along the sidewalk. Some clapped softly, some wiped their eyes. Rachel stepped out of the hospital doors, pushing her son into fresh October air. Ethan closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Freedom. Life. The road stretched ahead, real this time. And somewhere inside his chest, his heart beat stronger than it had in weeks. Months passed. Winter came and went. Spring brought green back to Cedar Ridge. Ethan's checkups became shorter, less frequent, hopeful. The scar near his collarbone faded from angry red to soft pink. He kept the leather vest hanging in his bedroom beside a framed photo of Daniel and the Iron Saints. Rachel learned things she had never allowed herself to ask before. About grief, about forgiveness, about how sometimes love doesn't leave, it just loses its way. Cedar Ridge changed too. When the Iron Saints rode through town now, people waved. At Maggie's diner, they were offered coffee instead of suspicion. The jar labeled for room 212 had raised enough money to help 3 other families with medical bills. No one advertised it. It just happened. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus returned with a surprise. A small electric mini motorcycle. Safe, controlled, bright blue. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. "You're not serious," Rachel said, laughing nervously. "Completely serious," Marcus replied. With careful supervision and a helmet slightly too big, Ethan rode slowly down his driveway for the first time. The engine hummed gently. Rachel stood at the curb, heart racing but smiling. Marcus watched from his own bike at the end of the street. Ethan turned carefully and rode back, not fast, not wild, just steady. When he stopped, he lifted his visor and grinned. "It doesn't stop," he said. Rachel hugged him tightly. "No," she whispered. "It does." Across the street, neighbors watched and smiled. The story of room 212 had traveled farther than anyone expected. But the real change wasn't in headlines. It was in how people looked at one another. Less judgment, more pause, more willingness to show up. And in Ethan's bedroom, the hospital wall had been recreated on a canvas, road, motorcycles, and all. Only now, the writers had faces. Years later, Ethan would remember the smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of a monitor, the way engines sounded when they echoed against hospital glass. But more than anything, he would remember that they came, not because they had to, not because it looked good, but because someone needed them. On his 16th birthday, Marcus handed him something small and metal, Daniel's original Iron Saints keychain, worn, scratched, real. "You carry it now," Marcus said. Ethan closed his fingers around it. His heart was strong, not perfect, but strong enough. Rachel watched the exchange quietly. She had learned that strength isn't loud, it isn't perfect, it's steady. It's people who show up. It's forgiveness where anger once lived. That evening, as the sun dipped low over Cedar Ridge, a familiar line of motorcycles rolled gently down Maple Street. Not racing, not demanding attention, just riding. Ethan stood at the curb, helmet under his arm, wind brushing against his face. Rachel stood beside him. For a moment she closed her eyes and let the sound fill her chest. Not fear, not loss, just movement, just life continuing. The engines faded into distance, but the feeling stayed. Somewhere deep inside, where scars once ached, there was now